Hello everyone, it's Annie, and I'm here today with my October reading wrap-up, finally. I have a ton of books to talk about today. In October, I read 16 books. My average rating was only a 3.75 though. I only had one 5-star, but I did have a lot of 3s, 3.5s, 4s, and 4.5s, so like it wasn't a terrible reading month, but we're gonna get into it, of course, how we always do, with my lowest rated first, so we can get that out of the way, and then at the end you can wait and see my favorite book of the month. So let's go. So it was October. I did read a ton of horror, so my least favorite book of this month was a horror novella by Cassandra Khaw called Nothing But Blackened Teeth. I should have listened to the Goodreads ratings. This has a terrible rating on Goodreads. It's 2.69. That is one of the worst average ratings I have ever seen for a book. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll like it. Maybe everybody's wrong. No, everybody's right. This book was terrible. It wasn't that it had anything like offensive in it or inherently wrong with it. The story is that this group of like 20-somethings rent an old Heian era castle in Japan for one of their weddings. So it's this group of friends who are attending one of their weddings, and they rent this house, like an Airbnb type style, for a party. And it's supposed to be haunted. And like, I love haunted houses. I like haunted house stories. And since it was set in Japan, I really thought I would enjoy it, but it wasn't scary. It didn't scare me at all. The whole entire book was these people talking about how much they hated each other, but also wanted to have sex with each other. It was just on and on and on about their past affairs with each other, about who wants to start an affair with the other one, how much this one hates that one. And it was just, instead of being a horror novel, it felt more like just really melodramatic and like just drama and things that I just did not care about and that I did not want in my horror novel. Yeah, it wasn't scary. I did like Cassandra Khaw's more recent horror novella, The Salt something, I forget the name, but that was very good, but this was not. So I would recommend not reading this one. Okay, so that book was a 2-star. Now we're getting into the 3 stars. We have The Dragoners of Baobazar, another novella. I wanted to read this because of the cover. Just gonna say that right now. The cover, absolutely gorgeous. And the premise seemed really interesting, and it was advertised to me as queer. It is queer. It does have non-binary and trans representation, but it's not in a main character. So I felt a little bit misleaded because, as I have said in the past, if a book is advertised as queer, as a big part of it in 2023, it really needs to be in a main character, in my opinion. So this is about a boy named Rue who is from nowhere. He lives currently in the city of Calcutta in India, but his classmates always remind him that he doesn't look like them and he doesn't really have anywhere that he comes from. When Rue asks his parents, they tell him they're descended from nomads, but he doesn't know where and they won't tell him. Interesting mystery, okay. Rue dreams things that wouldn't seem out of place in the fantasy novels his father read to him when young. Fragments of a culture that doesn't exist in this world but might in another, where sky and sea are one, and humans sail this eternal ocean on the backs of divine beasts. Rue dreams of dragons. Rue maybe remembers dragons, but his parents won't like confirm or deny this. So then Rue befriends Alice, who is a neighbor from the nearby Chinatown where he lives. They grow their friendship and relationship, and that's where the book kind of lost me, okay? So instead of focusing more on this awesome, really interesting dragoner culture that the author obviously put a lot of time and effort and thought into, they then focused on Rue and this girl Alice, which again, I just was not here for. It was a little bit of a, not toxic relationship, but just like a relationship that obviously wasn't going anywhere. And I know that it was supposed to show that Ruth thinks that he could belong in Calcutta, but then he realizes that he's too different and he really can't, and he needs to embrace his culture and kind of reconcile with his parents and find out where he's from. But that relationship took way too much time in such a short novella. Like, I'm here for the dragon on the cover, and I did not get enough of that. But it was a really cool concept. Basically, the thing is that, yeah, his parents are from an alternate dimension or an alternate world with dragons. So we're living in our world, so we don't get to see a lot of dragons, unfortunately. So it was a little bit disappointing, but 3 stars for the awesome concept and really great cover. All right, another 3-star is a dark fiction anthology by Indigenous authors called Never Whistle at Night. I was so excited for this book, and I am a little disappointed that it's only 3 stars for me. I will point out, it says dark fiction, not horror. Okay, I was confused because I expected it to be horror short stories, and some of them are, but some of them are just like dark contemporary stories. So I was a little bit disappointed by that, but it doesn't say horror, so technically I was not misled. All right, this has great stories by authors that we have seen before, like Sherry DeMaline, Darcy Little Badger, Brandon Hobson, Nick Medina, Rebecca Rowanhorse, Mona Susan Power, Tommy Orange, and Wabgeshig Rice, who wrote my favorite story in here, which is called Limbs. It's also the last story in this anthology, so you gotta wade through a lot of stuff to get there. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't finish all of these stories. I just couldn't. Some of them were really, really good, but some of them just totally missed the mark for me. Because it's a short story collection, I can't really go into more detail than that, but I will say that Wabgeshig Rice's book story is definitely worth the read. But other than that, there wasn't that much memorable for me, unfortunately, which was a little bit disappointing. Okay, another 3-star, which I think is the last 3-star, is Iris Kelly Doesn't Date. This is the 3rd book in the companion series of, Delilah Green Doesn't Care and Ashton Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. This was the worst one of them all, in my opinion. Iris was a character, she was kind of like the comedic relief, the supportive best friend character in the other 2 books. And she's really cool, and I was really looking forward to getting her story, but I just don't know. This story was a little bit of a mess. None of these people knew how to interact with each other. It was just an absolute disaster. So Iris is reeling from the breakup that happened in the 2nd book of Ashton Parker, and she's very upset, and she kind of vows off dating, and she just does casual hookups, which is like, okay, but does that really make you happy? And all of her friends and her family are asking her that, and she's adamant that she does not want a relationship, even though deep down she does. So one night she has a horrible one-night stand with this girl named Stevie, and they end up not talking to each other afterwards because it was so bad. But then Iris decides to join this local community theater gay Shakespeare play that they're putting on, and Stevie is also in that play, and they're playing the 2 leads who are in love. And then there's a fake dating thing because Stevie had told her friends that the one-night stand went really well, and it's becoming that they're dating, even though she and Iris had not been talking after that. So when Iris finally shows up, she's like, oh my god, like, you have to help me out and lie to my friends for me, basically. And Iris is like, okay, sure. And of course they have like this undeniable attraction to each other, and they do end up getting together. I don't know, it just was an absolute mess, to be honest. It was a little more convoluted than the other 2 books in this series. Again, everyone treated each other kind of horribly. There was a lot of miscommunication, And just, I don't know, the third act conflict that always happens in rom-coms, this one was the weakest of the other two books, in my opinion. Iris and Stevie I liked, but they weren't like super convincing as a couple that's going to last. I don't know. They just didn't seem very compatible to me, so I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority on this one. I do think the general consensus is that people like it, but in my opinion, I like the other two more. All right, the only 3.5 star I read was Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead. This was my introduction to Ashley Winstead. I've never read from her before. I probably will read from her again, but this was definitely not my favorite book. I had really high expectations for some reason, and it just didn't meet them. Ruth Collier has always felt like an outsider, even as her father rains fire and brimstone from the church pulpit. In Bottom Springs, his word is as good as law. But there are things the townspeople fear more than God, like the Low Man, a vampiric figure said to kill sinners in their beds on moonless nights. When a skull is found deep in the swamp, a hunt for the Low Man begins. Suspicion turns to Everett, Ruth's oldest friend, with a dark past. As Ruth and Everett grow closer, Ruth begins to unearth the town's secrets, determined to discover the truth. So Ruth's father is kind of the leader of a fire and brimstone evangelical Christian cult, and Ruth doesn't like him, and she becomes a librarian, and she really wants to go get a degree, but he doesn't let her, yada, yada, yada. Ruth and Everett's relationship was a really big part of this book, and I really wanted a more cult horror thriller book instead of like a dark romance book. It had Bonnie and Clyde vibes. I just didn't really like Everett, and I know we were supposed to like him, but I didn't. He was creepy, and I didn't like him. So unfortunately, this was only a 3.5. It had really good moments in it, and I really liked the whole conspiracy in the town and the whole cult aspect of it. And Ruth was a pretty strong character, and I loved the Southern Gothic vibes of it. But because Everett was such a big part of the book, he skeeved me out so bad. It's only a 3.5, unfortunately. All right, so now on to the 4 stars. First, we have a nonfiction, Lay Them to Rest, which is about cold case investigators, specifically about this girl, Laura Norton's podcast, The Fall Line and One Strange Thing. I have not listened to her podcasts, any of them, so that's one issue and why I didn't give this 5 stars. I really love dark, true crime nonfiction, especially about like solving cold cases and mysteries and things like that. So this was one of my most anticipated books, nonfiction books at least, of this fall, and it was good. I gave it a 4 star, but I think that if you are a fan of this kind of fiction, like nonfiction like I am, this didn't really add much new to the genre. It's a lot of stuff that you've heard before. So like she talks about how forensic investigators do their job, forensic examiners, and the autopsies and stuff, and it's just a lot of stuff that I've heard before, because I have read so much of this genre already. But the thing that really bothered me about this book was that she kept talking about her podcast. And like, I understand that the podcast probably got her this book deal, which is amazing, and I'm glad for her. But I didn't really want, like, she kept talking about the podcast, like making of the podcast, and like how she and her co-host met and how they, sacrificed time with their babies and their husbands and whatever to make this podcast and go on trips across the country to help solve these cases, which was amazing. But I didn't really care so much about that as much as I cared about the cases themselves. So I wish this book was actually just about the cold cases and less about the author's life, because it wasn't really advertised as a memoir. It was advertised as a true crime, science-y nonfiction book. So yeah, this one missed the mark a little bit on advertising, but it was still very interesting. And I think if you're interested in this nonfiction type of subject, then it still is one to pick up. Now we're on to 4 stars. The first one I want to talk about is a really delicious horror debut novel, The September House. Now, something that I just recently found out is that the author has a doctorate in clinical community psychology. So it makes a lot of sense because of how this book is written and put together. It says she's an avid horror fan and she has merged her understanding of the human psyche and deep love for storytelling into this piece of horror fiction. And that makes so much sense. This is a story about a woman named Margaret and her husband named Hal, who after years and, of renting, they finally can buy this house of their dreams. They're empty nesters, they can enjoy their retirement, yada, yada, yada. But this house is not actually the house of their dreams, because every September the walls start dripping blood and the ghosts of former inhabitants of the house start coming out and wreaking havoc. But Margaret refuses to leave. She loves this house and she wants it to be hers. And she can deal with the blood and the ghosts, but Hal can't, so he abruptly leaves one September. The thing is that Margaret doesn't tell anyone, and when her daughter, Catherine, her grown daughter, finally is worried enough to investigate this, she comes over. Hal is nowhere to be found. They're trying to solve this case. And that is all I'm going to say about the plot, because this book took some twists and turns that were so well done. I will say at a certain point, I knew it was going to happen, but I still wanted to read it to see how the author got there with the storyline. And the way that Margaret, the character, is portrayed is so interesting. This is a very, very layered book. Really does a good job with, I guess it's a metaphor or an allegory or something, with the haunting and human psychology and emotion. I will say there's some trigger warnings for alcoholism, spousal abuse, blood, murder, things like that. It is so interesting though, and you really question your own sanity while also questioning Margaret's sanity and trying to figure out what is true and what is just in her head. And it is so good. It was really interesting. It definitely kept me hooked. Yeah, so I highly recommend this if you haven't picked it up already, to pick it up on your next horror read. The next book is In the Watchful City. This is a novella. It was definitely something I have been meaning to read for quite some time. I did buy this book. Most of my books are library books, but I bought this signed and I am happy that I did. This is a Tor.com novella and I loved those. So I had high expectations. And while this wasn't a 5-star, it was very good. So this follows Anima, who is an extrasensory human tasked with surveilling and protecting a city named Aura's citizens via a complex living network called The Gleaming. And this character uses A-air pronouns. So although Air World is restricted to what A can see and experience through The Gleaming, Anima takes pride and comfort in keeping Aura safe. But when a mysterious outsider enters the city carrying a cabinet of curiosities from around the world, with a story attached to each item, Anima's world expands beyond Aura's borders, to places and possibilities A never before imagined to exist. But such knowledge leaves Anima with a question that throws into doubt their entire purpose. What good is a city if it can't protect its people? So this is, like this quote says, a story within a story. So this cabinet of curiosity person comes in to the city and Anima has to pick an object from their cabinet every time they visit them and pick this object, and then this person will tell them a story and of someone else's life. And it kind of broadens Anima's horizons and expectations for their own life and leaves them to question, what is their purpose and all this stuff. It's really good. It's short, so I feel like it could have done a little bit more, but I think it is suited to the novella format. I really love stories like this with stories within a story. That's just so fun. I love the anime Kino's Journey, which is kind of the same type of concept of stories within a larger story. So I really liked this. I liked the concept, and I'm definitely interested to see what else this author puts out in the future. Next, another nonfiction. This is The Sister, about North Korea's Kim Yo-jong, who is touted as the most dangerous woman in the world. Now, I was so excited to read this when it came out. I am, let's say, a North Korean history buff. I'm very interested in reading all the nonfiction books that I can, whether it be memoirs or studies about North Korea. I don't really know much about Kim Yo-jong, and neither does the author. That's the problem. Because North Korea is quite secretive about its royal family. We know that she is Kim Jong-un's sister. We know that she is incredibly powerful and incredibly high up in the Kim line in the North Korean regime, but we don't know much more than that. She only surfaced, like, I think her first appearance was during Kim Jong-il's funeral, which was really not that long ago. And we don't know much more about her. We know that she advises her brother. We know that she really basically controls the propaganda that North Korea puts out. But she also writes these scathing letters to politicians from other countries. And she really has no holds barred. She is fearless, and she is very powerful enough to do whatever she wants without worrying about Kim Jong-un retaliating against her. So they're the team that runs North Korea. And yeah, like I said, the problem is that the author also doesn't know much about her. So he does what he can, and I think he did a good job with the limited information that we have. But a lot of this book was padded out, which I understand why, because you need enough to actually publish a full-length book. I understand that. But it was, a little less about Kim Yo-jong than I would have enjoyed, and a little more about other things that had nothing to do with her. So if you're interested in North Korea and politics, geopolitics at all, I highly do recommend this book. It's very interesting, and I did learn a lot. But yeah, it's a 4-star. It is October, so we have another horror book, and it matches my sweater. It is Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. I love pink covers on horror books, let me tell you. So this I was immediately intrigued by because this has to do with a cult. So the main character of this story goes back to her small New Jersey village, or small town in New Jersey, when she's invited to her cousin's wedding. She has not talked to her family in so long, since she was 18, because they're in a religious cult and she has escaped from it. But she wants to go back for her cousin's wedding. So she decides to finally go back, and there's a big twist at the beginning. It's like around 15-20% in that I did not expect at all, which is really funny. This is definitely it's a horror novel, but it's definitely humorous at times. It's very irreverent, irreverent humor, which I did really enjoy. I have never read Rachel Harrison, so I'm not sure if that's something that she's known for, but I really liked it. I'm not going to tell you the twist because that is, I think, the best thing about this book. After the twist is revealed, it kind of not goes downhill, but I think it becomes a little bit more predictable because there's another big twist around 65-70% of the way through the book that I guessed very early on. So I think this book has a lot going for it with the whole cult theme, and kind of it's not what you expect. It's not what you expect. If you think you know what to expect, you're probably wrong. I'm just going to tell you right now. I really wish I could tell you what it is, but I can't because that's a major spoiler. But Vesper, who's the main character, is a really interesting character to follow. I don't know, I just really like her personality and her voice in the writing. She's very interesting, and just seeing her stories of growing up in this community, and it's just a really good commentary as well on organized religion in America. So if you're interested in any of those things, highly recommend this book. It was definitely addicting. The next 4-star is a graphic novel. This is sapphic. It's called The Hills of Estrella Roja, and it's really cute. The art is really, really beautifully done. I love the colors used, and just the two main characters are really, really cute. So it follows college freshman Kat Fields, who receives a mysterious email urging her to visit a relatively unknown Texas town with a history of strange sightings and Devil's Light, which are glowing red stars that appear above the town's hills every night. So she decides to take a solo road trip to this town to investigate it for her podcast, the Paranormal Podcast. Meanwhile, Marisol Castillo is also headed for the town to attend a funeral for her abuela, whom she hasn't seen since childhood, since her mother basically cut ties with the family and moved out of the town, because moving out of that town is a no-no. So, feeling lost and bored, she decides to help Kat after they meet by chance at a local diner. And Kat is also super cute, so they have a little romance and it's really adorable. The two girls grow closer not only to each other, but to uncovering the dark legacy that the town was built on. So I'm not gonna tell you what that legacy is. It definitely has something to do with Marisol's family and just a lot of interesting Latino folklore in Texas, and it was really well done. I think it was cute. I think it was very long. I mean, it's a graphic novel, so it didn't take me long to read it all, but I feel like the pacing could have been done a little bit better, and their relationship did move quite fast because of that. I don't know, it was just strangely paced. Like, the story, the plot of the paranormal sightings and stuff, I think was a little bit slow, but their relationship was a little bit fast. So I think it could have been done a little better, but I really enjoyed it. I love paranormal stuff, so since it's sapphic, this definitely hit the mark for me. Okay, the last 4-star is Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. I know I'm a little late to read this book. This book was everywhere and like everyone loved it, and I also really liked it. I thought it was really creative and definitely not your average thriller. So this follows a mother who witnesses her son kill a man with a knife. And this happens in the very beginning. And she witnesses her son kill a man. She has to turn him in, but she's like, what happened? Like, there were no warning signs. My son is like this funny, sweet kid. He's just a teenager. And she doesn't even know the man that he killed, but he seemed to have motive to do it. So she's just in this confusion and this mystery. And that night, when her son is at the police station, she and her husband are at home trying to get some sleep, contacting a lawyer. She falls asleep and she wakes up, and it's the day before it happened. So nobody knows what she's talking about when she's like, where is Todd, like her son, like, and he's at school or whatever. Like, everything is normal. He has not killed anyone yet. So the mom realizes that she has a chance to understand why her son did this and to potentially save him from murdering someone and getting arrested. So this has a really interesting time loop structure to it, and I really love that. It's very creative. I just thought that the twists are great. I did not see it coming, which is unusual. I really did not see it coming, but I just think that the book could have ended a little bit earlier. Like, there were about 50 pages or like 20, I don't know, 30 pages at the end where I was listening to it on audio and I heard a bunch of sentences that would have been such great final lines. And I'm like, okay, it's done. But then it kept talking. So I was like, okay, once the mystery is solved, like, we didn't really need it to continue. I think it was really good other than that. Again, very layered, of course, because of the going back in time part of it. I definitely will read Gillian McAllister's other book, which I don't think has as good reviews. I think it's called Just Another Missing Person. But because I liked this so much, I definitely will be reading that one. Now we're on to 4.5s. We have Good Morning Midnight by Lily Brooks Dalton. This is adapted into a movie on Netflix. I don't think it's called the same thing, or maybe it is, I don't know. But I watched the movie before I read the book, full disclosure on that. I really did enjoy the movie. This book has two different points of views. One of them is about a man who used to be a scientist, and when the world kind of goes into this mysterious apocalyptic lockdown, everyone evacuates from the research base in the Arctic where he is. And you don't really get told what the issue is. It could be a pandemic, it could be a nuclear war, it could be, you know, a meteor coming, hurtling towards Earth, and everyone evacuates. We're not sure, it's not told to us. But regardless, he is left alone, or at least he thinks he's alone, in this abandoned research base. And he has everything he needs, he has all his food, he has everything he needs, but he ends up finding this little girl that was also left behind. And he tries to contact someone to take her back, but he can't get in contact with anyone, so then he just accepts that he is now this little girl's caretaker, even though he doesn't really want to be. So that's one of the point of views. The other point of view is a woman on a long-distance spacecraft with her crew that were sent out before this catastrophe happened on Earth. And they were sent out, I think, to study like Jupiter's moon or something. Anyway, it's a long trip. And they lost contact with the space agency because of the mysterious apocalypse that happened on Earth. But nobody told them about it. So they're out in deep space, not knowing anything about what's happening on Earth. It's just radio silence, and they're worried, and it's really starting to get to them mentally. And I think that this book was really good. I can't tell you because it's a spoiler, but well, I can tell you this. They end up getting in contact with this man at the research base, and that's how these stories interact with each other and intersect with each other. But I can't tell you more than that. It definitely delves into the man's past a lot, and he wasn't that great of a guy. Like, he knocks people up and he just plays around with girls a lot, but you kind of like to hate him. Like, he's a love to hate kind of character, and you do root for him to survive in the Arctic. I really liked the setting. I just love sci-fi stories like that. This is very literary sci-fi, which I don't usually read, but because I loved the movie so much, I wanted to read it and give it a chance. I found this at a local library sale, so I was very happy that I did. So if you're looking for a good literary sci-fi, don't miss this one. Next, we have Dark Rise by C.S. Pachat. And as you may know, they are the author of the Captive Prince series. And this is their YA novel debut. Okay, this is the first in a series. I believe it's going to be a trilogy. And I'm reading the second book right now. It just came out, so that's great timing. But this book was a wild, wild ride. This is a dark fantasy book, so it's a little different vibe than Captive Prince. So, the ancient world of magic is no more. Its heroes are dead, its halls in ruins, and its great battles between light and dark forgotten. Only the stewards remember, and they keep their centuries-long vigil, sworn to protect humanity if the Dark King ever returns. Spoiler alert, he's gonna return. Duh. 16-year-old dock boy Will is on the run, pursued by the men who killed his mother. When an old servant tells him of his destiny to fight beside the stewards, Will is ushered into a world of magic, where he must train to play a vital role in the oncoming war against the dark. As London is threatened by the Dark King's return, the reborn heroes and villains of a long-forgotten war, and yes, there is reincarnation in the story, begin to draw battle lines. But as the young descendants of Light and Dark step into their destined roles, old allegiances, old enmities, and old flames are awakened. Will must stand with the last heroes of the light to prevent the dark fate that destroyed their world from returning to destroy his own. This book is full of twists, okay? The ending, oh my god. Okay, I will have to confess, 75% of the way through, I was like, this is good, but this is a very generic YA fantasy. Yeah, it's gay, which is great, but again, it's kind of generic, a little bit forgettable. No, that is wrong. Annie was wrong. The ending was so good, unexpected, twisty. It really blew my mind, and it left me really wanting to read the second book. The second book, I just have to tell you, is even better than this one, in my opinion. It's so good. Pachat is so good at really slow burn world building, slow burn romances. I love the romance that's going to happen between two of these boys, and it's very slow burn. So in this book, you don't really get a lot. In the second book, there is more. And I just really like it. I really love the world building, and it's just great. I really enjoyed this one, and I can't wait to talk to you about the second one. Okay, last 4.5 is Rouge by Mona Awad. She is the author of Bunny, which I liked, but I like Rouge more. This is about a cult. Okay, we love cults, and it absolutely felt like a fever dream. This is a horror novel. It's so weird, and it really feels like you're in like this fever dream that you can't get out of. It is really well written, really well done. I can confidently say that I am a Mona Awad fan now. So it follows Belle, who has been insidiously obsessed with skin and skincare videos for a while. When her estranged mother, Noelle, mysteriously dies, she finds herself back in Southern California from Montreal, where she lives, dealing with her mother's considerable debts and grappling with lingering questions about her death. The stakes escalate when a strange woman in red appears at the funeral, telling Belle that her mother went the way of the roses, which is like this very cryptic message, and Belle's like, what does that mean? But she finds this pair of red shoes in her mother's closet, which she was never allowed to go into as a child. And with the help of this pair of shoes, she's lured into the embrace of La Maison de Méduse, a lavish culty spa to which her mother was devoted. There, she discovers the frightening secret behind her and her mother's obsession with the mirror, and maybe her mother's death. This is like inspired by Snow White a little bit. The only complaint that I have, this would have been a 5 stars. This really would have been, and I wanted it to be so bad, but there was a chunk in like the middle-ish of it, or like the third quarter of the book, that was really slow, and it dragged a little bit. Okay, there's this whole thing, I don't really, if I say it, it's not going to make sense, but there's this whole subplot with Tom Cruise for whatever reason, and it just really dragged. It was a little bit repetitive, but I really think that Belle was an interesting character to follow. I love stories like this where like the narrator is a little bit unreliable, and you don't know what's real and what isn't real, and learning about her past with her mother and their relationship, it was very strained but very codependent and toxic, and learning what Belle did to her mother to make them become estranged, or maybe what her mother did to her. It's very interesting stuff, okay? I really love this. I think it was super well written, and I just wish it hadn't dragged so much, so it could have been a 5. Okay, now we're finally on to my favorite book of the month, which was Bonds of Brass. This is a pretty short space opera, but it's the first in a trilogy, okay? And it is gay. If you liked Winter's Orbit, you would probably like this, okay? There's a lot of intergalactic politics and a lot of gay yearning, okay? We love that. So this follows Etienne, whose life was shattered when the merciless Umber Empire invaded his world. He spent 7 years putting himself back together under its rule, even joining an Umber military academy and becoming the best pilot in his class. Even better, he's met Gal, his exasperating and enticing roommate. But when their classmates spring an assassination plot on Gal, a devastating secret comes to light. Gal is the heir to the Umber Empire. Etienne saves his best friend and flees the compromised academy unscathed, but now he faces a terrible choice. Does he protect the man who's won his heart and trust that Gal's goodness could transform the cruel empire? Or does he join the brewing rebellion and fight to take back what's rightfully his? This book has a lot of twists and turns, and I really do enjoy Gal and Etienne's relationship. I just really liked it. It was a lot of fun. That's basically why it was a 5-star, because it was a fun gay space opera, and gay space operas are my bread and butter. It had really interesting politics. The world building I think could have been done a little bit better, but the thing that bothers me about it, but that I can't really fault it for, is that it's YA. It would have been so much better if it wasn't YA. Like, I understand that it's set in an academy in the beginning, so it has to be a YA, but it would have been so much better. The whole overarching story, because I've read all 3 of the books since I'm filming this around Thanksgiving, the whole story would have been so much better. It could have been longer, it could have been darker, and just a lot more interesting if it was adult instead of YA. But I'm not going to take points off for that because that's just unfair. So I really, really enjoyed it, and obviously I would not have read the whole trilogy if I didn't really love the first book. So again, if you're interested in another gay space opera, and I think this one kind of flies under the radar a little bit, don't miss out on it because it was really fun and really like funny too. It had a lot of humor in it, which was great. Alright, thank you so much for watching my October wrap-up. Before you guys go, I do want to announce that I started a Bookstagram. My handle is Library Lesbian, okay? And I would really appreciate if you gave me a follow. I really love making graphics and recommendations, obviously, so check that out. The link will be in the description down below. And if you liked this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and also comment down below what your favorite book in October was. So I'll see you next time, and thank you for watching. Bye!